Thanks for having me, Megan.
Yeah.
It's awesome to be here. My name is Sean, and I am British, born in the UK, grew up in North Wales, and I've ended up here in Canada. So I'm located in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan with my husband, where we run a strength training business. And I am a mom and a coach. And I think I can actually start to think of myself and call myself a runner again these days. It's taken a while to get back into it after the kids, but that is starting to come back into my life. And yeah, I am very blessed to be able to do a job that I love and work with people every day that are just trying to get better at what they love. So
I love it. Well, how did you get into this to begin with? Because I think like a lot of people come up through the traditional, like maybe you were an athlete, in school, and then you get, I don't know, like a kinesiology degree, and then you kind of go into coaching and training and personal training. Like,
yeah,
I think yours might be a little bit different. How did you get here?
well, it kind of started off with the norm. I was athletic as a kid. My first love was dance. Actually, loved dance. Crazy about dance. Not classical dance, but more like contemporary. Love music too. So movement and music together was my jam. And that was the first type of movement that I remember absolutely falling in love with. And then I was lucky enough that my parents decided to move up to North Wales when I was about 7 or 8, because my father's actually from there. And then I was exposed to all this wonderful landscape and all the opportunities to do things like horse riding and rock climbing and, all the general kind of falling out of tree stuff that you still enjoy doing when you're 8, 9 years old. So I grew up with quite a broad background of just general movement, I would say. I was into running pretty early because, as a school in North Wales, one of the sports that everybody does is cross country. Didn't really have a choice. In fact, I remember our gym teacher chasing us around the cross country course, which was beautiful, down to the beach, along the waterline, back through the sand dunes, up the mountain, gorgeous. So I did eventually fall in love with that. And I ran a lot as a kid even, came home from school, ate a sandwich, went for a run. And where was I? Yes. So I got into competing at running. It was the first sport that I competed at. I'd never really competed at dance. I just loved it. And I really enjoyed that buzz. Really enjoyed it. Didn't have a clue what I was doing in terms of putting a training program together. I just went out the door and ran, like a lot of people do at first. I'm still sort of 12, 13 years old at this point. So at no point did it occur to me that maybe I should have some structure, or maybe I should be doing some strength training, because it wasn't the thing back then. I kind of grew up in the 90s. I was born in 1982. So yeah, it was just like go out the door and run. And if I ran more, then that was probably a good thing. And then what happened? I was very into like a lot of things at that age. Sailing was another big love of mine at that point. So when eventually I ran into injuries with running at about 16, 17, I was starting to get all sorts of lower leg pain because I was just running too much, using it to battle my mental demons and deal with my mental health and the transition of becoming a teenager and all the crazy stuff that goes on. I didn't really know what to do about it. I had no idea. So I was just like, oh, well, I guess I can't do that now then. At college, or in my high school years, I actually opted to study fine art and photography. So I wasn't doing any sort of study that supported what I was eventually going to get into at that point. And then after school, I found the idea of committing to university education absolutely terrifying. And I just chose to avoid the issue by going traveling for turned into about 4 years. So I'd say I had a worldly education. And I continued to do sports as I traveled. I went to Australia. I learned to surf. I went and lived in the Alps for nearly a year and got very into alpine rock climbing. All the things that you were kind of scared to write home to your mum about, I did.
I love it.
It was great. And yeah, I think I was having way too much fun to come home and do anything else. And I wasn't really sure where it was going to lead me. I just had seen at this point a lot of my friends go through university and come out and not get jobs or not necessarily be happy and still be 20 grand in debt. So I was a little directionless, but having a good time. Then, weird twist, my father was in the film industry, always had been, so I'd grown up around it. And by that point, he was a second unit director, which means he's in charge of kind of a whole unit of filming. And the second unit is usually where the fun stuff goes on. And he basically told me I was coming home. He needed a bunch of rock climbers for this job that he was doing, and I should come home and I should come and do some work on set. So I was like, all right, okay, if I'm going to get to climb and hang off or cliff face all day, I'll do it. So I came home and worked on this little movie. I don't think I ever even saw it that came out. I'm sure it did come out, but we were filming in the Isle of Man. So I was in the Isle of Man for like, I don't know, 3-4 months, literally standing on the edge of a cliff. And I loved it. And I was like, this is the kind of job that I could get paid to do. Love the people. I love the discomfort of it. I love the unpredictability of it. I love being outside, and I was still in my happy place. I was doing something physical. Yeah, so at the end of it, I turned around and I said, "Okay, Dad, I'm going to join the stunt department." And he was like, "Oh no."
I've gotten myself into.
Yeah, he couldn't really talk though because he had been a stunt performer for a long time before he
that's
became
cool.
a second unit director. So I knew the job existed and I knew all the pathways and I knew a lot of the people. So once I had that idea in my head, I was just set on that.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and that's what I did. So I did a bit of extra training to go on top of all the other sports that I'd randomly accumulated. And then a couple of years later, I was on the British Stunt Register.
Is that like a union type of job where there's like a group of like athletes and stunt people, and then like film directors go to that union and say, I need this type of person for this movie?
Yeah, so how it works is there's an official register of stunt performers and coordinators, and that is governed by the BSR Stunt Committee. We do have a union, which is Equity, which is actually the same union as the actors, because stunts are a bit weird. They're not quite crew and they're not quite actors, but in terms of a union, they're more like the actors. And there's various tests to pass, various physical tests in different categories to pass. When I was getting on the stunt register, I believe there was 5 different tests spread across 4 different categories. And I'm going back a long time now.
Yeah. Really taxing your memory.
20 years ago. And you had to pass these tests, and if you passed all the tests, you submitted all your experience. You also had to get quite a few days on set as extras, because just being on set is kind of an important part of the experience. And then how it works is, as a probationary performer or a junior stunt performer, you are always working underneath a stunt coordinator, and the stunt coordinator is the person coordinating and organizing the stunt. Yeah, that's kind of how it works.
That's cool. Have you been in something that we might know about?
Probably, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I will laugh to my husband now because I almost kind of lost track of all the stuff that I was in, because it all, at some point, all kind of became a bit of a blur. And yeah, probably. I mean, the whole point is that you never actually see us, right? Never actually see the faces. But I was fortunate enough to have got some great gigs. I worked on a lot of HBO projects. So that was probably one of my favorite things, was working on the Game of Thrones. That was for like 6 seasons. That was a great job. Wonderful people, really fun things that we got to do. It was full of stunts, full of crazy stunts. Yeah, it was great fun. And some of the Marvels, I suppose those are some of the bigger things that I did. I was in there running around in the background somewhere. Yeah. And then also a lot of other smaller independent projects sort of in between. Some things which I've never really got around to watching, and some things which will pop up and I'll be like, that set looks familiar. I'm sure I was there. What was I doing? Oh yeah, there's the stunt. That, things that I never even thought would see the light of day. Some things which have never seen the light of day, never made it past the cutting room floor. So yeah, like a whole broad swathe of stuff. I just said yes to everything in the first few years, because that's kind of what you do.
And did you ever get injured along the way while you were doing this?
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of a dumb question, but it seems like part of the job is like you're putting yourself in all of these different, sets and scenarios and stunts, and, you're balancing on these cliffs and jumping and flipping, and it's like you have to get injured at some point, despite everyone's best efforts to keep you safe.
Yeah, everyone's doing their best. Like stunt coordinators, riggers, everybody's doing their best to keep you safe, and obviously the risk is controlled, but accidents do happen. That's the reason why the stunt performer is doing it and not the actors, because there's a chance that something could happen. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I was lucky. I did the job if you count all my training and the days on set I was doing it for 15 years. I had one incident that landed me in the emerge, and of course everyone gets the knocks, the owies that you just kind of you just get on with, and a couple of kind of near misses where you go, whew, that could have been different. But Yeah, everyone's doing their absolute best to keep the situation as safe as possible. But ultimately, little things do happen. And I wish that I knew now what I knew about strength training. And, I'm sure we'll get into that in a minute. Mobility training, because I know that you're into that too, because I probably would have lasted a lot longer.
That was going to be my next question. Like, why did you leave? Like, burnout? Did you like age out? Like, what causes someone to leave that industry?
Yeah, all of the above, probably. All of the above. It was a perfect job for me in my 20s and early 30s. And I was getting towards the end of my 30s, and it was everything. It was, the little knocks and bruises were kind of adding up. I could feel my body kind of just stiffening up. Lots of just general impact was having an effect on me. I actually had a horse fall, not on set, but off set. But it was so bad that I ended up with a scoliosis in my spine. And that was really painful. And I had no tools to deal with it. So every time I took a knock on set that would have usually been fine, I was dealing with this flare up of stuff going on in my back. And so there was that. Also, I was kind of craving a home life because I was on the road a lot, living out of hotels and not really holding down any kind of long-term relationship. It was a bit like, I ran away to join the circus kind of thing. Yeah. And yeah, all those things. I was feeling my age, and I was asking myself, do I really want to be falling downstairs in my 40s? I was like, I can, but do I want to be? That's the question.
Valid question.
Yeah, and I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go into the coordinating side of things because I just didn't want to live on set. I also knew that I wanted a family, and that wasn't really, looking like it was going to happen if I was living on a film set. So all of the things, and I naturally came up to a bit of a break in filming with something, and I knew that I had like 3 or 4 months before the next season was going to start, and I thought I'm just going to take a break. I'm not going to take any jobs in between. I'm just going to go off radar for a little bit. So I went and did something completely random. I did my yoga teacher training in Thailand. I was just like, I need to feel physically better. Let's go and do this.
You said random, but like I don't know. I don't see it as all that random because you're already in kind of like the movement business and you have this injury and you need a break, you want to feel better. To me, that seems like a very logical choice.
Yeah, I needed to unplug. I needed to just kind of, just chill the heck out, stretch the heck out, and get out of Dodge for a bit, turn my phone off. So I went and did that, and I came out of that going, that felt so good. Like I had nothing to compare it to, when you're just kind of living in one world. And all of a sudden you're exposed to something completely different, like how your body can actually feel when you do take care of it a little bit and have a little bit of downtime. I'm not saying that going and doing a yoga teacher training is the answer for everybody, but for me at the time, it was what I needed because my pedal had been to the floor for like, a decade, and I needed to go and unplug, and my nervous system was just fried because I was constantly doing things that were a little bit scary.
What style of yoga was it? Just out of curiosity.
It was vinyasa, so of course it was, pretty hot and fiery and go. But to me, it felt like really, a big come down from what I had been doing. Yeah, so I started, taking a few less jobs after that and just doing a bit of teaching yoga on the side, and it helped balance me out a little bit. Yeah, and it gave me a reason to say no to some things sometimes, so I wasn't always like yes, the next thing, and it gave me a foot sort of back in the real world where people are working 9 to 5s and going to their yoga class every Monday morning at 9 a.m. and I actually really liked that because even though the film industry in itself was kind of like having a family, like you'd always see the same people, and I miss them very, very much, but it's very removed from actual reality in terms of what people are doing in like the real world. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see how that would be.
Yeah, so it was great, and it gave me like a segue, I suppose.
So then how did you transition from yoga into like where's the strength piece come in?
Right, yes. I mean, that bit is interesting because I'd always been doing things that made me feel strong. So for example, I was always into rock climbing. I always climbed pretty hard, and in between movies I would go climb. I would get on a flight somewhere and go climb. So I felt like I was strong. I practiced martial arts, so I was, throwing people around and being thrown around and doing that kind of stuff. And I felt strong, but it wasn't strength training. And little did I realize that all this stuff that I was doing wasn't actually helping me in my long-term health. It was starting to actually just wear me down because I wasn't doing any just good old-fashioned strength and conditioning, taking care of my joints to prepare me for those sports. It was all skills, all basically skills training. I'm sure you see this with runners who do nothing but run. And I wasn't really doing anything at all throughout my 20s and throughout at least half of my 30s. I wasn't doing anything at all to prepare my body for the BS that I was putting it through on a daily basis. So that light bulb went on for me actually when I met my husband, who's a strength coach, and he's like, what have you been doing?
And how have you been surviving this without this?
How have you survived?
Well, who could blame you, right? Because like you and I are not that far apart in age, and I have a very kind of similar. I was not in the stunt industry, but like we have a very similar like. You did sports growing up and played in middle school, high school, college, like did a lot of activity. But back then, strength training for women specifically, I always joke, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, about how in college, when I was on a collegiate softball team, we quite literally took, you're going to laugh so hard, like a men's muscle and fitness magazine and Cosmo, or therein, like, you know, any other sort of Marie Claire, whatever women's magazine. And we tried to merge them together to make our own strength workouts. Like we did not have any professional coaching. I mean, all of those resources were at the time in the school that I went to, basketball was like our flagship sport. So all of the coaching resources and all of the big dollars and the recruiting money and stuff went to those guys. Fine, not a problem. But it just is something that is so vastly different from now. And even in the small town gym that I work and coach at, I see girls and women who are so young, just crushing it and doing all sorts of amazing lifts from simple to complex and doing things. And I'm like, if I had had that when I was growing up, this current situation, not that my situation is terrible, but like could be very different in a lot of ways. And so I'm always, you know, like clapping for these women when I see them. And a lot of them are just starting out. And then a lot of them are, you know, doing complex things. A lot of them are bringing other women along with them and trying to show and teach, you know, that kind of stuff. And I just think, oh my God, like, yeah. So it's no wonder that that you and I are sort of where we are with this, because it's like we went so long without it. And then we had sort of I don't want to say a breaking point, but there was like a point at which I was like, this current routine is not sustainable in its current state. And if I continue down this road, I have enough forethought to see that this is not going to be good long term. It's not going to lead to me like being able to walk in my 80s and 90s.
Exactly. That's exactly the thoughts that I was having. And you're absolutely right. You know, it just wasn't a thing. It just wasn't a thing. I mean, I remember even when I was running cross country for my school, nobody mentioned strength training. And I remember realizing that it was probably a good idea at one point, and being in a hotel and having access to like 5 and 10 pound dumbbells and trying to do, like you say, those little routines out of Cosmo or whatever it was. And that would be something that if I could go back and change, I would have been lifting weights from day one, because I feel like, I put it this way, like I joke to my husband now that I could go back and I feel like I could perform better in my job now in my mid 40s than I was doing in my early 30s, like late 20s. Because without that background of just basic strength and conditioning, I had nothing left to pull from. It was like, you know, my gas tank was empty. And as you say, there's this foreshadowing of like, if I feel this crappy at 35, how am I going to feel? Yeah, so I'm so glad I met him, and he was like, yeah, this is what you've been missing. This is what you need to do. He was already 10 steps ahead of me. He'd been strength training people for 10 years, and he was already, I know we're both into the functional range systems world. He'd already done that. So he taught me all the basic mobility stuff, like this is how you do your cars, and oh my God, your shoulders don't move. And at that point, I remember our first sort of argument, this is before we were dating, and he was like, I want you to just segment your spine and roll down and, you know, like an unloaded Jefferson coil touch the floor. And I was like, and he showed me, and I was like, you want me to do what now? My spine doesn't move like that. And he gave me like a water bottle or something to hold. And I tried, and I was like, I can't do this. I cannot, like, the basics were not there. Like the basic body control, basic ability to segment my spine and move my joints the way they were supposed to move was just not there. And I remember literally kind of like throwing the water bottle on the floor and going, oh, this sucks. I was so like humiliated and humbled because I'd always identified as an athlete. And all of a sudden, here I was going, none of my stuff works like it's supposed to, and I'm in pain. And somebody is standing in front of me pointing it out. It was very difficult to take. I think I remember going, screw this, I'm going for a run.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was how it started.
I love that. Well, I think that's like a pretty common experience that I have had with my clients as well, just trying to expose them to functional mobility and getting them out of perhaps the narrow parameters that they've been operating in, albeit perfectly fine. And to your point, you feel strong, you think you're strong objectively, people are telling you from the outside looking in, they're saying you're such a strong runner, you're such a this or that. And so you think, oh yeah, like I'm good, right? And then all it takes is one person to say, move like this or do this. And you're just, to your point, like humbled. In my case, at certain points, I was like so embarrassed. I'm like, how can I not be able to do this as as an athlete, as a runner, as a yoga teacher, whatever. And it's just, once you get over that hump, I think it's sort of just your brain opens up and you're like, you get actually curious and excited about it because you're like, oh, if I can master this, like if you could master your spine or even get it to, not even master it, just get it to move. What else can I do? Like, what else can I open up? What else can I work on? So that's really where I try and start with people is like, you don't have to perfect this. And this is like the long game we're playing here. So it's not about trying to going back to your like dance, love of dance. It's not like you're trying to perfect a move. Like the goal is not to perfect a shoulder car or spinal segmentation. The goal is to expand range of motion. The goal is to gain more control, gain more strength for then the greater goal of doing your sport faster, stronger, with less pain, better recovery, the whole 9 yards. So it's a different way of thinking because people come into this and they think, oh, I'm trying to execute a move like a deadlift or something else. And when you try to explain to them that that is not the end goal, there's a little bit of like confusion and a disconnect. But then once they do get one, I find like one joint, one movement, one something, then they're like, I get it now. Like I get that this is not performative, like in the sense that like this is a deadlift. Like I said, this is a game of expanding.
Absolutely. Yes. And I always have to remember, now that I've been coaching people for a long time, to come back to that realization in myself that, the mobility training per se, or the strength training, it's not about getting good at that. It's about getting better at yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it that way, then there's always infinite potential for growth and exploration. Right. And I think that's what sparked my imagination and what kept me coming back to it. Luckily, I don't mind, after the initial shock of realizing that I was in a real bad state, you have to just get really humble with it, right? And just be like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm starting with. I'm like, okay, well, where can we take this? What can we do with it? And it's like, I always feel it now. I mean, whenever an injury has come up, which they do occasionally, it's always this double-edged crap. But it's also a bit of a blessing because it puts you right back in that place where you're like, okay, well, this is what I have to work with now. This hurts. I can't do this. And I've ruled out that for now. But I can do this. I can do A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. So this is where I'm going to start and this is what I'm going to work with. Always brings you back to that kind of beginner mindset. And yeah, as you say, if you can do that with clients and relate that back to, well, actually having better parts is going to make you a better runner, if that's what they care about. Do you know what I mean? It really depends whatever floats their boat, but relate it back to them in that sense. Then, and if they're willing to take that on board and do the hard work, because it is, I think in today's culture of instant gratification, it's actually quite a hard game to be in, to be selling the long-term stuff, because everybody's instant reaction is, as you say, is like, well, this is really hard.
Yeah.
I don't know, how do you find that with your people? I mean, I'm thinking that maybe people that run ultra marathons are the kind of people that aren't necessarily scared of long-term goals.
Some are. I think there's still, well, let me say this. I think some have a healthy understanding of just how big the gap, the skill gap, the knowledge gap might be from where they sit to where they ultimately want to go. And that's totally great. There are others that come in who are like, well, I've just finished this marathon, or I've just finished this, and I totally get it. And it shouldn't be that much more difficult for me to do a 50K or to do a timed race or whatever. And that might be true, but a lot of the people that I work with are coming off the road and they're going to trail. And so there's another element, there's another skill that you need to develop coming off of the road and navigating the trails. And what I find is both groups of people and everybody in between, the strength and mobility piece is like the missing key or the linchpin where it helps them to make that transition better, because the very first thing they notice is like, oh, my body is getting more beat up just by having to run on the trails and these uneven surfaces and doing a lot of uphill, doing a lot of downhill, and, lateral movements and just all the stuff that you're not really having to contend with in road running. And it's just an interesting process to watch people go through. It's sort of a fun little like social science experiment for me, because I have gotten to the place now where I can, with reasonable certainty, predict when a person comes in, like the progression of how that's going to go, and kind of where along the continuum they're going to have that like break, in the sense of like, oh, all right, I can't just keep repeating the same things I was doing over here in road running. I have to take this new route and start to incorporate this other stuff. The amount of times people are like, I know I need to do the other, and I'm doing air quotes, other stuff. I know I need to do it, but ... insert, I just would prefer to run, or I don't have time. That's the big one. I'm sure you hear that too all the time. It's just when they start to just do little bits of it consistently, that's when they have their big aha moments. And then I don't have to really sell them on the long term. Once they've gotten to that place, they're like, well, if I'm only doing this much and I'm getting this result, then what if I were to do another 5 minutes, another 10 minutes, whatever it might be? How much more, or how much better, or how much strength, whatever, how much could I get with just a slight increase in my investment? And it's just fun to watch them kind of like go through that and be like, oh my God, I can't believe I waited so long to do this. It's like, what was I thinking? I'm like, this is so normal. This is like quite literally the progression that everybody goes through. It's like there's resistance, and then sort of like there's like this, moment where you're like, I can't believe that I can't do this, or that this is limited, or whatever. And then they start to invest a little bit of time and energy in it. And then they get the dopamine hit of like, this doesn't hurt as much, or now I can lift my arm over my head where I couldn't do that before, or my hips don't hurt. The running world, obviously, like hips, big thing. So if you can get somebody to, break free a couple more degrees of freedom in their hips, it's like, you might as well have just given them $1 million, because they're totally just like mind blown. Like, why don't my hips hurt anymore? And I'm like, that's the place I'm trying to get people to, is just like have that first little win. And then I no longer have to quote sell it. I do at some point have to just keep reminding them that like, this is a forever investment. This is not, because of the world of PT, which is absolutely great. But the model, especially here in the States for PT, is have an injury, go to the doctor, get a referral to PT based on your injury for X number of weeks. And that's highly likely to correlate with the number of weeks or sessions that your insurance will cover. And that's oftentimes, as not going to be long enough to completely address the issue. And then people, like I say, graduate from PT, and then there's this space in between where they think they're good to go. They've graduated PT and they've gotten a reasonable set of like, they can bend their knee to 90 degrees, or they've reached these certain parameters. And so PT kicks them out. And so PT graduated you. Of course, I'm good to go. I should just go back to running. Well, it's like, there's this space in between where like you certainly could, but unless you continue to address whatever the thing was, it's highly likely you're just going to repeat this cycle back around, because you're graduated, but you're not where you need to be in order to do your sport. And especially one like trail running, where we're talking about uneven surfaces, climbs, descends, long efforts, time and distance. And it's just a whole other thing than road running, for sure. So I
mean, if they're lucky, they're going back to their sport with a tissue that has equal capacity to the one that wasn't up for the task in the first place. So getting them to that next level is there's always a bridge to be gapped, and a bridge to be gapped, a gap to be bridged for sure. Yeah, and it never ends.
So how did you, like, after Jesse gave you that little mobility test, how did you make the leap from like?
Yeah, it was a wake up call. It was a wake up call that I needed, and I was still in the stunt world at that point, and I was living out of a tiny apartment in Belfast, working at the studios there every day. And Jesse came and like moved in with me, and I'd never had that kind of support before on a movie with somebody living with me, and I had someone to come home to at night, which was so nice. And we just started doing little workouts, just started doing little strength training sessions with the very few bits of equipment that we had in the apartment. We had one of the first things we got was a bar to hang from, some rings to do some push-pull work, because luckily we could hang stuff. And then we did a lot of kind of bodywork stuff, just bodyweight stuff at first, because that's, all we had access to. And then as soon as we could get ourselves to a gym, he just taught me all the basic stuff, because the basics work great, and taught me how to use a barbell, and which I was very intimidated about at first, but quickly just fell in love with. And yeah, so it started with basics, learned how to squat, bench, and deadlift, not because I wanted to be a powerlifter, but just because those are some great simple patterns, and went down the FRS rabbit hole, got my own certifications, was teaching kin stretch, completely out of the stunt world by this point. And then we had kids, which threw two more beautiful little spanners into the works. And then all of a sudden your body changes again, and navigating pregnancy and postpartum while also trying to create some good foundations was really tough. And you have to, you have to get really humble again, all over again. And then there was COVID, which was because at that point we were trying to build our business.
Yeah.
I remember we were both working in gyms at that point, and the day we found out we were pregnant with our second kid, everything closed. So that was one of those life moments, and that we were like, okay, well, I guess we're on our own. We can't rely on things just opening back up, and we certainly can't rely on other gym owners or studio owners to put food on our table right now, because their businesses are closed and there's nothing they can do. So let's go online. So at that point we started teaching kin stretch and mobility online, and I was pregnant throughout the whole thing.
How did that go?
Actually really well. Yeah, great. I did my prenatal postnatal certifications, and I just adapted and got on with it. And although times were kind of weird, we were really enjoying what we were doing, because it was the only thing we could do at that point. We were living in Canada at this point. And yeah, that's where our business started. And we called it the Movement Cave because it literally started in our basement, and it felt like a cave. It really did at that point. We were staring down this, black hole of the camera in an unfurnished basement with the gray walls and the concrete floor, just teaching and just kind of building our skills in front of the camera, teaching that way and putting it out into the world. We called ourselves the Movement Cave because that was what we did. We went down to our cave and we moved and we shared it with people.
I love it.
Yeah, and that's kind of how the Movement Cave started. And then, of course, life got back to normal a little bit, and we just chose not to go back to the gyms because I'm a kind of fiercely independent person. I was like, I'm not gonna, we've got 2 kids now. We've got to take ourselves seriously. We're coaching for a living, which is not the easiest path to choose. We're doing this ourselves. We're doing this the hard way. We decked out our basement by this point, and we had the rack in there, we had everything in there, and we just started coaching our clients from our basement, and we never went back to working for gyms or studios again. Every now and then we're contracted in to do stuff, which is fine, but not having to rely on somebody else's business was definitely the right thing for us.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people, myself included, who have a very similar path, right? Like I was also coaching and teaching in person a lot. And then I had started to do some online stuff because I just was like, I don't think that I want to continue to teach this many hours a day because, it is, especially if you are teaching certain styles of yoga or you are, you're physically active and that's exhausting for you. And you're not even really doing the workout, but you're fully physically involved in it. And I was starting to get burnt out on that. And I was like, well, so I had already started to semi teach online. And so thankfully, I had a lot of the structures in place already so that when everything shut down, I didn't have to join the learning curve of on the fly, how do I create an online studio? I actually had it ready to go. This was just very fortuitous timing. So all I had to do was just email people and put it out and be like, hey, if you remember that class you were physically in last week, you can do it this week virtually. And here we go. So excellent. It did work out nicely. But yeah, I very much resonate with like, I don't want to be tied to somebody else if I don't have to. Like it is definitely a challenging route to go to work for yourself and create your own business and generate your own income and not rely on somebody else to just cut you a paycheck. I mean, there are days, I'm sure you have those days where I'm like, it would be just so nice if somebody could just cut me a paycheck, just show up to my 9-to-5 job. Because I've had plenty of those over my lifetime, plenty of 9-to-5 jobs. But this one is just way more fun, I think, in the long run. No pun intended. But so when did the running come back into play?
The running came back into play. If I'm honest, it was after my kids. I was doing a little bit, but I really did not feel comfortable running pregnant. And by comfortable, I just mean physically comfortable. It was really uncomfortable for me. I'd also moved to a country where for 7 months of the year, there's snow on the ground, which put me off a little bit, I have to say. I've toughened up now. I've toughened up since. And I will run in the snow. And yeah, I got it back after the kids. I was like, there's something missing. I really miss this thing that I used to do. What was it? Oh yeah, I used to go for runs by myself. And it was a shocker to get it back. My goodness. Never will I ever stop running again, because getting back into running,
it's the worst.
And this is what I have to remember every winter. I'm like, don't stop. Whatever you do, just don't stop. Just go out. I know it's cold. Go to the track. Do whatever you got to do, but just don't stop, because getting back into it after a gap is tough. It's pretty unforgiving. So yeah, there was my husband at the time was training, in fact, it still is, training a local marathon runner, and she was organizing this wonderful local event that we have every year now, which is called the Moose Jaw Running Festival. I was like, yeah, you know what? I could train for that. I could get back into it for that. So for me, I had that event to shoot for, and I trained for it and loved it. And the next year they made me an ambassador, which was so fun. And yeah, I need the races to aim for now, because I know there's a lot of people that can just run for the love of running, but I'm like, no, I need to have something to aim for. Otherwise, I will find a way to wiggle out of doing the hard stuff. And for me, I love 5 and 10K. Right now, for me, that's where it's at. So I just enter a bunch of them spread across the summer, and I know that'll keep me going.
Yeah.
And it's perfect for me right now. My kids are still pretty young. They're 5 and 8. So timing wise, for 5K, I can get a training session in 25 minutes. I can go do some intervals. I can, and the longest runs that I'm doing right now is kind of 10K. So I can be done in an hour. It's perfect for me right now. And I'm loving it again.
That's good. I think a lot of people are that way too. They have to have races on the board in order to keep that accountability and that structure for themselves, because there are a small percentage of people who are very intrinsically motivated that they don't need a schedule or a race. This is who they are. They get up, they do their thing, and they don't need that little bit of external oversight. And then there are a lot of people who just aren't that way. And that's totally fine too. They have a lot of things going on. They have a lot of interests. And so it's hard for them to pick and choose which one they're going to devote their time to. So having a race on the calendar makes it so that when it's decision time, it's like, do I want to go rock climbing or do I want to go running? Well, I have this race on the calendar. And if I choose rock climbing 9 times out of 10 over running, then I'm probably not going to finish or do well in this race. And so I'm always encouraging people to, put all sorts of runs on the board, 5K all the way up to whatever your A race is. And if it's a 5K and a 10K, that's great too. Like just having that stuff floating out there, I think is just that little bit of, it's like that little reminder, like, oh, I need to do that thing. So I don't think it's terrible to pre-schedule yourself for a few or a lot of races in order to continue to force yourself in a good way to show up and do the training.
Yeah, it keeps me focused. Otherwise, I will go down a rabbit hole on something else.
Yeah. Well, you guys now have like a whole program that's like specifically like a strength and mobility program that is for running too. Like, so you've really taken it all the way full circle from,
Yeah,
starting your own running to then really trying to help people get better at this sport, right?
absolutely. Yes. And we built that. It's now out for our members. We've called it the Freedom to Run program because really that's kind of our goal, just giving people more freedom to do the things that they want to do. And what we found through working with runners is that it needs to be timely and it needs to be simple, accessible, get it done. And we've also included like a hefty dose of stretch mobility work in there as well. So how we plan the program is to have 3 days of strength training, one of those days being a what we call dynamic effort day. So moving moderate weights or lighter weights as fast as you can with control. And then 2 days being what we call repeated effort days. So focusing more on just building strength and hypertrophy. And each workout takes 40 minutes is the feedback we've had. We put it out for a test run with our runners, a test run, and some of your runners too. And the feedback that we got was good. And things were doable for them. They were able to get it into their schedule, and people enjoyed the follow along mobility aspect in there as well. So yeah, we're coaching a couple of our clients through the program now. It's only been out for, I'm going to say 3 weeks. We launched it like 3 or 4 weeks ago, something like that. But people seem to be enjoying it.
What if I were to force you, and I didn't ask you this question ahead of time, but like, what are some of the like big pearls of wisdom or piece of advice that you would give, someone who's running, whether it's 5K or 500K, when it comes to strength and mobility training?
I would say that if you're not doing it for a start, then you should absolutely give it a go, because there will come a point where you cannot become a better runner by running more. You will just hit one of two barriers. Either a speed barrier where you just won't get any faster, or a tissue barrier, an injury barrier where your tissues will have had enough. If you want to see improvements in your running at some point, the answer is not run more. The answer is, how can I give myself better stuff to run with? It's a bit like having a car and taking it out for a drive, but never doing the bodywork or the engine work that's going to help keep that car on the road long term.
Yeah, the routine maintenance.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but it does have to be there. It shouldn't take away from your sport. It should, in fact, add to your sport. And it's the truth. And unfortunately, I know some people don't like to hear it or whatever, but I think I would say just try it. Try it for 6 weeks. See what happens. See how it goes for you. So it's something that is difficult at first because it's new. Everything new is going to be difficult. And it's hard if you're already very good at running to do something that you're not as good at, to spend your time on that because you feel like it's a waste of your time. But that feeling of not being very good at it will very quickly be overtaken by realizations that you are actually gaining from this, because you will start to feel changes. You will start to feel connections that you haven't felt. You will start to see improvements in your pace. You should start to see improvements in your recovery too. All those things, and you can't deny that evidence. But yeah, it's. I know it's a hard sell for some people, but I would say just try it. Try it for 6 to 8 weeks. Even if you don't want to try it in your on season right now because you're just into whatever you're into, your next off season, just make it all about giving that a go and then see where you are next season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the key piece is trying to give it enough time to work. People will do it once a week, and if the choice is once a week or no times a week, I'll take once a week all day long, because at least it's planting the seed and you're establishing this as a bona fide part of your training. But people will do it once a week, every 3 weeks for, 6 months. And there is a certain amount of the dosage needs to be right, and the timeline also needs to be right. So I know that there are maybe people listening to this that are saying they've tried strength training, but it's maybe a little bit more in the thing that I just described versus what you're describing in terms of 3 days a week and give it 6 weeks. And so if you're in that place of frustration, perhaps where you're like, I've tried it and it doesn't work, my first go-to is like, well, I'm big on tracking training around here. These guys have heard me talk about tracking your training ad nauseum. And so what we think we remember doing and what we actually did based on your spreadsheet, your training peaks, your program that you're getting from a coach or the one that you're making up. Like if you're not keeping track of that, we tend to think of ourselves as having done more oftentimes than we really have. Like our memory is just a little bit more on the rosy side. And
Right.
so if we're not really keeping track of this, we think we've done more than we actually have. But then when we go to look at it, we're like, oh, actually, I really only did get that one session in for 3 weeks. This happened and that happened. And so that's really where, that's the first place I always try and get people to start is let's go back historically and look, what have you been doing? Not because I want to point the finger and be like, you suck, you didn't do this. It's like, we need to all be on the same page about how much you have done and what's realistic too, because we're saying three days a week, but there might be somebody for whom 2 days a week is more realistic in the sense that that's going to be more sustainable for them. And I'll take that all day long. And I think people hear, I'm not pointing the finger at you, but I think people hear recommendations and then they try to execute on them. And it's an all or nothing type of mentality. They think, well, Sean told me that I have to do 3 days a week for 6 weeks and I can't do that. So I might as well just not do it altogether.
Yeah.
That's where I try to meet them and say, all right, start with 1 day a week, do a solid 40-minute, whatever it is, whatever prescribed. Honestly, I'll take 10 minutes if that's all you can give me initially, because I know that somewhere down the line, they're going to feel some of those feelings and have some of those results that you talked about earlier. And they're going to be like, I kind of like this, and
Absolutely. Yeah. People are going to start where they're at. You have to meet people where they're at. And if they can give you one strength training day a week, then awesome. Just make sure we're hitting all the stuff, and cutting out the fluff and making it as effective as possible. And if people aren't tracking, then you as a coach are kind of lost. It's very difficult to help someone because you have no idea what they've been doing, so you can't change anything. And then just like they did, if they can think back to when they first got into running, they're increasing their miles gradually, right? 10%. And then same with strength training. You're going to be gradually over time increasing what you're able to do, whether that's like what you're physically able to do right now, or whether that's what you're in your current like mental capacity you can fit into your life right now, what you can squeeze in between all the other commitments that we all have as grown-ups. It can be hard to squeeze that extra thing in, right? So it's maybe you have to make room by letting go of something else. Is that to your advantage? Is there something in your program that is just fluff? I would say, looking at programs and going, well, you don't need to do that. You're already doing that over here. This is where I loved your email this morning where you said you had a program SOS. I was like, yeah, of course, as coaches, you do that all the time, right? And a lot of time you look at someone's program and go, well, that can go. That's a bit of a waste of time. You're already doing this over here. And I think a lot of people they love the volume. It makes them feel like they're doing a lot. But sometimes there's junk volume, right? There's volume that isn't needed. So getting someone like yourself to look at a program that you're doing and be like, well, maybe you can get rid of that. Or maybe you don't need to do that twice a week.
Yeah.
There's often a perception that more is better, whereas actually better is just better.
Yes.
If you can get rid of X, Y, and Z so that you can get 1 or 2 strength training days in a week, then do it.
Yeah, but people are very afraid to let go of things. Like to your point, they're very afraid to let go because they think they've gotten this far based on what they've done in the past. And they have such a stranglehold on some of those things. And I don't blame them. Like I have definitely done this in the past as well, but they can't see the forest for the trees, right? They don't see, to your point, that they're essentially double dipping in certain areas and they're overdoing it. And a lot of times I'll get people that like, I'm a big fan of running 4 days a week because I think that allows for some of this other stuff to come into play. And oftentimes I get a lot of pushback from people coming in. They're like, well, that's not enough days. And I'm like, okay, fair. Maybe you have been running more, but how are we also going to incorporate this other stuff in order to kind of help progress you, right? Sometimes I think about it like 2 steps forward, 1 step back in order to keep progressing, right? 2 steps forward, 1 step back, so on and so forth. And this 1 step back is like, can we let go of whether it's some running, whether it's, something else? I was going to say yoga or whatever, but like, could we consolidate efforts by doing this and like pull back on some of this volume? You'll be amazed at how much time you free up. And now you don't have the time excuse to be able to tell me like, oh, I can't do this. I just eliminated a couple things here. I bought you, I don't know, an hour or 2 a day. Great. Let's repurpose 30 to 40 of those minutes doing something else that's going to then catapult you forwards.
Right? It's all about prioritizing. I mean, we're all busy people. Time is the one thing that we don't have. And, I don't want to see anyone waste 3 hours of their week doing booty band work, which I've seen on a program, I'm like, why? There's a million and one ways to be more effective. But I lost my point now, what I was going to say.
The booty band, like the second you said the booty band, all I could think about is 7-way hips. And I'm like, just skip booty bands and go to 7-way hips and like, you'll get exactly what you need.
It doesn't matter how many times. I have a little rule with myself that whenever I have a client with me face to face and we're doing 7-way hips, I'll do it with them, right? Because it just works visually. You see the person in front of you and you're doing the routine. It's like never ever does that routine get easier. It was so good. I can't remember the name of the sprint coach that came up with it now, but it's an awesome
It is
routine.
so good.
Yeah, and also, periodization was what I was going to say. There's times in a program for there to be more running, and there's times in a program for there to be more other stuff. And your program doesn't have to look the same week on week, month on month. In fact, it shouldn't. In fact, there should be times when we're focusing on like doing a push on getting stronger. And maybe there's a time when we're doing a push on getting faster, but it doesn't all have to happen at once. You don't have to fit it all into that one week. I think that's something that I see a lot too, is the misconception that it's just like a linear progress. Like you start running 3 times a week and then you end up running 4 times a week, and you start running 4 miles and then it becomes 5 miles and it becomes 6 miles and it just continues on. And where the heck am I supposed to put my strength training?
Yeah, periodization, I think, is another misconception. People come into it thinking once you start, it's a straight rise over run, 1-to-1 ratio. We just keep progressing up. Yes. And again, it's the 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. Like we have to cut back at a certain point to give you the amount of recovery that you're going to need to then be able to continue to go forward. And so again, a lot of this it's second nature to us as coaches, right? Because we're just like steeped in it. We've practiced it ourselves. And we get people coming in who have never had experience or exposure to it before. And it's fun for me to get to say some of this stuff to them, to be like, actually, you can do less, and then you can actually get more results from it. And oftentimes it's a hard sell, but eventually, I don't want to say I wear them down, but like eventually they're like, okay, she keeps saying this. There must be some validity to it. And then they try it, and then they come back and they're like, you know what? Gosh darn it, you were right. I was like, you don't say. Do less and get more from it, which is like so cool to see for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if people are like kind of interested in you guys in the Movement Cave and what you guys are doing and want to maybe follow along, where can they find you?
So we're at www.themovementcave.com. Physically, we're located in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, but we have online resources and online programs, online coaching on our website. We're also on Instagram. We are at the Movement Cave. Go check us out. We are trying to build on Instagram. I'm not sure if it's like a generational thing as well there, but I find social media so tough, but we're working on it. And yeah, that's where you can find us. We're very happy to just chat.
Yeah, people should go and follow along, because you guys do post a lot of really good stuff just in terms of like little bits and bites of movement things that people can test out. So it's not like you have to, I'm just saying for someone who's maybe teetering on the fence of being like, well, I heard these two chicks talking about mobility. Like maybe I want to try some of that stuff.
We also have a YouTube channel. Actually, there's a lot of our older classes I put up there. And I think there's even a runner's class up there right now. There's a bunch of free stuff on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, we will link those in the show notes below. So amazing. Thanks for coming to hang out and spend some time and geek out over all our favorite topics.
Yeah, no, it was totally fun. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.